And we keep things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM, heartlandsignal.com, and on WSBC 1240 AM Chicago on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, and marvelous as of this recording tonight, as of the airing of the Sports Cubicle around the terrestrial radios of Chicago and the Midwest. The Chicago Bears would have played their first preseason game against the dreaded Miami Dolphins and that powerhouse of an offense. And everybody knows the seriousness that is preseason football. But I did want to get around the water cooler, around the cubicle, and talk a little bit about the depth chart going into the game, into the last few practices, and what we're kind of looking forward to over the next few weeks, because there is a lot of interesting news and tidbits that have been coming around from some of the great, what I believe is the best beat reporters in the game that cover the NFL. But before we get to that, here's the quick Bears offensive depth chart before we got into kickoff. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the number one. Tyson Bagent is your number two. Case Keenum, your number three. I think that is a really good quarterback room. I think you have your veteran expert quarterback in Case Keenum. You have your rookie star that is going to be a sophomore year in Caleb Williams. And you have a grinder in Tyson Bagent. You can't ask for anything more. Running backs is DeAndre Swift. Wide receiver one, DJ Moore. Wide receiver two, Roma Dunze. Two tight ends, Cole Kmet, tight end one, Colston Loveland, tight end two, and your starting offensive line is Braxton Jones at left tackle, Joe Thuney at left guard, Drew Dolman at center, Jonah Jackson at right guard, and Darnell Wright at right tackle. Marvelous. I will say this, the offensive line to start is a whole lot better on paper than it was last season. What are your thoughts, first of all, when you hear two tight ends and then the projected offensive line going into week one of preseason?
Well, we think that they're significantly improved because of the overhaul of the offensive line. And there's, I think, the key draft picks. You have tight end Colston Loveland and wide receiver Luther Burden III. We're going to be helpful for supporting Caleb. And obviously, the big hire is Ben Johnson. He's a respected play caller from the Lions. He's considered a home run hire by some. But that offensive line you mentioned, I think that the key is acquiring guard Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney, and then signing center Drew Dolman. That the sack machine that was the Bears has been a problem. So, I mean, they still, of course, like you mentioned, they still have DJ Moore and Roma Dunze, and they're going to have a new offensive scheme, obviously. But last year, the offense ranked last in total yards. It was 28th in points scored during the 2024 season, and he was sacked, Caleb was, 68 times in his rookie year, which is a league high. So that was a pretty dire need. So you won't be able to see much in the preseason anymore. I mean, it's like they don't really want to get anybody hurt, so it makes sense. So they're down to 3 games now, of which 2 will be at home, Buffalo next, and then, of course, at Kansas City when nobody will play. But, really where you're going to see things cooking is once the season starts in September. So the exhibition games, I mean, to me, are even less impactful than they used to be. But it's good to see the Bears out there, and we'll get to see some people playing for their jobs. Pretty much, that's really what it comes down to in some cases. But I think that the starting lineup, like you mentioned, is pretty well set in stone. So we'll see how it goes from here. But there's always a lot of optimism in August, and this year more than usual with the newness, with the new shiny toy that we've got, and a coach and a new team for our star quarterback, hopefully. So from here we move on, and we'll. I mean, obviously you're not going to see the first string, but Buffalo and Kansas City are a couple of good challengers in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think you brought up some great things that we want to kind of shine a light on to, at least spotlight for this edition as we're talking about preseason. So I'm obviously, if you guys have been listening to the Sports Cubicle here, me on the Sports from the Couch, I'm on the podcast from Blue Wire Podcast Network, Bear Era, with Kieran Hall from the Irish Bears Network and EJ Snyder from Bootleg Football. And one of the things I said as we started getting ready for this preseason, for this training camp, was I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking that people stay healthy. Too often last year, we were hearing soft tissue issues. We were hearing players didn't even want to practice, but they were all willing to play. This year, you need your guys to be out there and practice as best you can so they can learn this offense, so they can get down pat what Ben Johnson is going to implement. The second thing is I wanted to see how Caleb Williams is going to take to this Ben Johnson offense, how DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Roman Dunze, Luther Burden, all these different guys, because it is going to be more complicated. And this is a coach that's a little bit more red ass, where he's going to make you run the play over and over and over again. You and I have covered enough football over the years to know the defense is always ahead of the offense. But what you don't want is sloppy, bad, dumb football. Maybe after day one, maybe at day one of camp, you may get a little bit of that. By the time you're heading into where we're at right now, you can no longer afford that. So the only two reports I care about from Courtney, from Brad, from Johns, from any of the great reporters that cover the Bears team, the only two things I care about right now is that players are healthy and practicing. They don't have to go 100%. We know they don't do that anymore, but that they're healthy and practicing, and that Caleb is picking up this offense. And we're not going to get that during preseason games, but where we do get that is during these two team practices, which is funny, Marvin, because we talk about preseason games having less meaning. They're more a pageantry and for second and third stringers to get a chance to find a job. But I do like now that they're doing these joint practices. I do think they can learn a lot from these joint practices. What are your thoughts about that the joint practices themselves during summer have become more of a litmus test than the actual preseason games?
Yeah, I mean, the scrimmages and such are maybe just as valuable or more so than the games. But as it stands now, obviously, I don't think that Ben Johnson's going to stand for people looking in the stands while the Hale Daniels pass is going up. I think he's going to be a little bit more strict in that regard. But one other thing that was kind of cool, there was one game even earlier on the Chargers played the Lions. What was really cool about that in the Hall of Fame game is they brought in Musburger for the fourth quarter, and that was, he was put in the Hall of Fame in the broadcasting wing. So a tip of the cap to Musburger was one of the staples and originals of the CBS NFL and CBS years ago.
Absolutely. That's a great call. And I guess before we wrap things up, Marvelous, because it is a super busy edition of the show and football is back, baseball is in full swing, and we have some crazy media stories that have been broken over the last few days. When you're looking at a preseason game, even though the game doesn't mean much, you heard kind of what I'm looking for on my bulletin board. What are the things that I have my ears to the ground for? When you're at this point in August, middle of August, kids are going back to school, college is right around the corner. We know where your bread and butter is, but we know how much you love covering this team and this sport. What are you looking for news-wise? What are you looking for to really sink your teeth into these nuggets in August during the NFL training camp season?
I'm looking for, as long as the starters are in there, to see some good execution, clean play. And like I said, the defense is always ahead of the offense. So I'm not that worried about the defense. I think the key to this whole team is going to be how the offense progresses under this guru Johnson. Again, a never before head coach, which always makes me a little nervous because, they've never had the main clipboard before. So there is a newness to that. I want to see how he adjusts to that, although I guess he'll be calling the plays himself. So that will make it a little bit easier. They won't have to wait for something to come down from the press box where the quarterback has his hands over his ears trying to figure out what to do. So that should be good right there. So I like that, and I just want to see how that goes, how smooth things are. Mostly the offense and the defense is going to be just fine, I think. So the new plays we're going to see. They're not going to reveal everything, obviously. They don't want to show all the the wrinkles and the bells and whistles, but I think you're going to see a lot of variety. You're going to see, tight ends might be in play more since they drafted one, and they may use that more. And I think they have enough receiving core now to have a variety. The running game, I'm a little bit concerned about because we didn't really mention anybody from a running game. So that's a thing that's a work in progress, I think.
Yeah, we'll see if the rookie makes the team and how he'll impact it. We'll see what happens with DeAndre Swift, who was once on a Ben Johnson team and was traded away. And obviously, if Roschon Johnson can stay healthy. And this goes into what I think is the biggest strength on paper for the Bears, because you could see, like you mentioned, the roster on the page looks decent and looks somewhat more competent than usual. And while you have a first-time head coach in Ben Johnson, it is somebody that was highly touted, not just by one team like the Bears did with Matt Nagy, where they thought they found the diamond in the rough and they were the smartest team in the room. This is a coaching staff, though, that if you're a Bears fan, at the very least, will be a bunch of responsible adults in the room. I mean, you're talking about Antoine Randall being the assistant head coach and the wide receivers coach. Eric Bieniemy is the running backs coach. But what's most important is who is running your defense in Dennis Allen. I think this is a really strong coaching staff that is going to put the Bears team on their asses and is going to make them work, which is something we have not seen in a training camp in a very long time. Marvelous. Any final thoughts before we head on to the break?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Football season and then the college season starts in a few weeks. They're already touting Texas, Ohio State in the first week as the Fox game of the week. So, you may have the first game in college being also the last game in college, which is kind of interesting.
And
so,
shout out,
and
shout out to the University of Illinois, who is on the top 25 in the coaches poll. So you have a top 25er in the state of Illinois now.
Right. Well, maybe that's a bad omen, but
he's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. I'm Mike Mercado. You're tuned into the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM Chicago, Heartland Signal, WSBC 1240 AM Chicago, and on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle.